Good afternoon. My name is Michaela Vandersea, and I'm the Executive Director for Cedar Valley Hospice. On behalf of our staff and volunteers, I would like to welcome you today to our Celebration of Life. Each year, we hold this Celebration of Life event to honor and remember our loved ones who have died within the last year. The purpose of this event has always been to create a shared space to commemorate the love we shared with our person and to say the name of our loved one out loud. This last year has been especially difficult due to the pandemic. Physical separation and social distancing impacts so many things, including the grieving process. This year we are recording this event, and it will be made available on our website at cvhospice.org and our Facebook page on September 20th to allow those who are not able to join us today the opportunity to view the program. As we begin today, I want to thank you for allowing us to be a part of your grief journey. Many of you here today are strangers to each other with different life experiences and backgrounds, and you each had a unique relationship with the person that you've lost. Yet we are all here with one very important thing in common. You have all lost someone that you care about. And when someone you love dies, it's one of the hardest things in life. It's almost as if the world pauses and shifts, and then we have to figure out how to go on without them in our everyday life. There is not a defined time to grieve or specific steps that you can take for this process, and your journey will be unique to you. There can be a healing that comes with a shared recognition of thoughts and feelings, and regardless of if you are new to grief or if you have been walking this path for quite some time, and whether you are missing a spouse, a child, a parent, a sibling, a relative, or a friend, we all recognize that familiar hole left in our hearts when a loved one dies. Chloe Frayne writes, "It was love, and I lived in it, and it is grief, and I will carry it." Today, let us carry it together as we create the space to grieve, to love, to reflect, and to heal. I would like to invite Lynette Jordan up. Lynette has been with Cedar Valley Hospice for over 20 years and is a grief counselor for Cedar Valley Hospice. I am certain that her words today will offer you some peace and comfort.
Welcome, everyone. It is so nice to look out into this crowd and see so many familiar faces, and it warms our hearts to have you here. Before I get started, I'd like to dedicate my message today to in memory of my parents. My mom and dad taught me so much about life, overcoming adversity, taught me about compassion, and gave me my faith. I am so honored to be here today as we gather to remember and pay tribute to our loved ones who have died. It's a joy and a privilege for those of us who work for Cedar Valley Hospice to be with you all again. You who allowed us to be part of your lives, share your journey, all the while as you face the most difficult time of your life. And we watched as you said goodbye to your loved one. I've had the privilege, as Michaela said, of working for Cedar Valley Hospice for over 20 years. I've worked with hundreds of patients and families. I think I can speak for all of my coworkers when I say that we have been blessed beyond measure by knowing you and caring for your loved one. And we grieve too. So we are gathered here today by a common bond of grief. Why do we do this, some might ask? Most of you were able to have a memorial service or a funeral for your loved one, but this is different. This service provides a time of remembrance in a way that we may have not been fully able to when the loss was so fresh. It also creates a time for communing with others who are experiencing the pain of grief. We gather here to grieve together and to remember. Yesterday, we all saw our country and the world remember 9/11. Lots of programs and speeches given to honor all those lives that were lost on that day. We live in a world that we hear of unspeakable tragedy almost on a daily basis. The media saturates us with news of mass shootings, war, deaths related to the pandemic, crimes against humanity. And if we're honest, we can become numb to it all. So when we grieve in our personal lives, it can feel really lonely. We feel supported for the first few days and weeks by the people who care for us, and they were all well-meaning, but at some point they have to return to their own lives and their own problems to face. The beauty of our hospice is that we provide free grief services to anybody who is bereaved in the community, and that includes anyone, regardless of whether they were on our hospice program. And we have a great program for kids, because yes, they grieve too. When the center of your world has been torn from your life, it feels a bit like we've died too. We need the company of others to stand beside the giant hole and not turn away. As grief counselors, we simply are here to help you survive the pain, to be present and bear witness to it. About 3 years ago, I was asked to help out in the grief department. Prior to that, I had worked as a social worker with our teams who tend to our end-of-life patients and families. I loved my job. And I thought during all those years as a social worker for our dying patients that I had seen the greatest amount of emotional suffering and pain. I was wrong. The greatest pain in the journey is after the loss. The journey to make sense of a life without your loved one. A journey when you feel crippled with sorrow. I did not feel qualified to be a grief counselor. I felt helpless, like when someone is grieving, and I thought I had to fix it. What do you say to people who are grieving? So what happens is we leave a grieving person alone to do it on their own. Here's the thing though, most grievers do not need a therapist or a diagnosis. Grieving people need someone to reassure them that they are not growing crazy, that they might have an appetite again someday, that they might actually sleep through the night, and that what they're feeling is normal, that this pain is really as bad as they think it is. Someone to listen to their story over and over again as they integrate it into this new world. Someone to sit with them in their pain and acknowledge how truly awful it is to try and live again without this person who was their world. Once I learned that, I thought, I can do that. Our grief counselors simply try to walk beside you to help you withstand the life that you are still called to keep living. We know that grief is messy, it's complicated, and yet it is survivable. I read a cute note last year, and it said, "Okay, 2020, you need to call your mother to come and pick you up." I thought that was really good. Wasn't that the truth? And here we are, still struggling to make sense of this pandemic, keeping up on the science, and trying to do the right thing. Meanwhile, so many lives have been lost. Many of you here today have lost a loved one through COVID-19. We know that many of you could not have a traditional service and that you were left isolated from your family and support system to grieve this loss. We've had to learn how to Zoom. I was so afraid that I would never know or understand how to do that. But even with that technology, it left us feeling isolated and alone. Imagine grieving with no support available through family and loved ones. We've missed births, weddings, graduations, funerals, all sorts of special occasions, just in an effort to stay alive. Then again, on the other hand, in some ways, COVID has unified us. With everyone hurting, it has become easier to talk about grief. I know I've seen many segments on shows like 60 Minutes and elsewhere addressing grief. What a concept. I recently read an article by Megan Devine, a known expert in grief. She said there is pain in this world that we cannot be cheered out of. What we need is acknowledgement. Some things just cannot be fixed. They can only be carried. So how did we get here in a society that is so afraid of grief? Well, I did a little homework before this talk today. In 1917, I learned that Sigmund Freud wrote a very well-received paper on grief. He said we simply need to withdraw our energy from the person who died and attach it to someone else. I just couldn't believe my eyes of what I was reading. This paper laid the framework for suppressing grief. Sadly and interestingly, 2 years later, his daughter and grandson died. He desperately tried to recant his work, but it was too late. The lesson here is no one is an expert on your grief but you. I read that in the 1920s, people who were grieving were left without support, and an emphasis was placed on the parties and celebrating life. Grief was tucked away from polite society. And this is an unsettling thing to say, but I think it's important to say it. The practice of confining women to insane asylums and sanitariums due to their unseemly response to grief continued into the 1930s. It's dumbfounding to think about, isn't it? The word hysteria became known as the diagnosis for these people who are grieving. I am so amazed at how far we've come from this mentality, and yet we have so far to go to acknowledge how painful grief really is. Then came World War II. There was death and loss all over the world. People in London decided to make the statement, "Keep calm and carry on," as an effort to mask the situation and the devastating losses. We now know that that stiff upper lip doesn't really work. So today I can say that this work is the most profound privilege of my life. I get to see really brave people every day who pick up the phone and ask a complete stranger to listen to them as they tell the story of their broken heart. You see, it's really hard for them to go to their family and friends, and that's why they do come to us. Grieving people learn quickly to hide their grief, to avoid judgment and disappointment. People feel awkward and they don't know what to say, so they say things that make the griever feel worse, or they try to take their pain away, and we know that just isn't possible. This just tells the griever that it's not okay to talk about their pain. We as a society need to get comfortable with feeling awkward so that we can really sit with people in their pain and not try to fix it. I want to end today by talking about a common theme that myself and my other grief counselors see in the work of grief: guilt. So many of our grief clients struggle with it. Beautiful souls, wonderful, loving people who cared for their loved ones night and day, had beautiful love stories with their people. Yet they come to us riddled with guilt for not being all-knowing, all-powerful, in a word, for being human. I thought for those of you who've experienced those feelings, I would share this here today. It's a segment from a very famous letter written by a Civil War soldier, Sullivan Ballou, to his wife, Sarah, the eve before his death. He wrote, "I cannot describe to you my feelings on this calm summer night when 2,000 men are sleeping around me, many of them enjoying their last, perhaps before death. The memories of all the blissful moments I have spent with you come crowding over me, and how hard it is to give them up. Forgive me for my many faults and the pains I have caused you. How thoughtless, how foolish I have often been. How gladly I would shield you and my children from harm, but I cannot. I must watch you from the spirit land and hover near you while you buffet the storms with your precious little freight, and wait with sad patience till we meet to part no more. Sarah, if the dead can come back to earth and flit unseen around those they loved, I shall always be near you in the garish day and the darkest night, amidst your happiest scenes and your gloomiest hours, always, always. And if the soft breeze fans your cheeks, it shall be my breath, or the cool airs your throbbing temples, it shall be my spirit passing by. Do not mourn for me, think I am gone, and wait for me, for we shall meet again." I don't know about you, but I find so much comfort in these words. You see, our loved ones who died were human too, and they had regrets and guilts and need for forgiveness. Maybe we can forgive ourselves just as we hope they did. In the end, we have a choice as individuals and families to include these cascading losses as a part of our story, to acknowledge that love for the person who died carries on in spite of death. We can talk openly about the hardships of this time, listening to each other and making space for grief to exist. We can learn from our mistakes throughout history and choose a different, more loving and honest way to emotional well-being. We can live in a world that respects the whole range of human emotion, both joy and loss in equal measure. We can allow the sun to shine on both the bad and the good. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here and sharing part of your journey with us. My name is Nathan Shute, and I'm one of the client services managers at Cedar Valley Hospice. Since 2010, Cedar Valley Hospice has participated in the We Honor Veterans program, designed to express gratitude and appreciation for our veterans and for their service to our country. Every veteran whose service is known to us receives a certificate of appreciation, a pin, and a military quilt in honor of their service. We recognize that every year, approximately 1 out of every 4 patients that we serve at Cedar Valley Hospice has served in the military. It is with reverence and honor that we take a moment today to remember those who have served our country and what a privilege it is for Cedar Valley Hospice to serve them in a time of need. At this time, I would ask you, if your loved one had served in any of the armed forces, if you would stand on their behalf so we may show our appreciation to them one more time. Thank you again for their service. As we prepare to read the names of your loved ones, I wanted to share with you the following conversation I had with a former Cedar Valley Hospice co-worker whose son had died very unexpectedly. The secret joy of mine that people may not ever understand is when they say his name, share a story, or remember him with me. People are afraid to bring him up because they're afraid of my reaction. They are afraid of my tears. But in telling the truth, there is a small measure of healing in hearing his name and knowing that he is remembered and that he left a footprint on their life and on this world. I daily need to remember him. I want others to always remember him. There is healing in hearing his name.
Joanne Vance, Wayne Vance, Arlene Bassett, Jerry Beal, Lori Blitch, Norman Brown, Bill Camlin, Chuck Carney, Robert Cavanaugh, Holly Clark, Ross Clement, Esther Cutsforth, Robert Cutsforth, Sandy Dannenbring, Mary DeBauer, Jeanette Dolan, James Drury, Dennis Emberton, Linda Faust, Howard Foss, Ray Freet, Karen Gallivan, Marilyn Reiter, Jerry Harmson, Pat Hedrington, Shirley Hedrington, Margie Heidt, Linda Hendren, David Hennessey, Ardith Holmes, Craig Holmes, Carol Huck, Allan Jacobson, James Johnson, Jane Johnson, Jim Johnson, in honor of Sharon Johnson, Larry Cadolf, Bev Kane, Peggy Kane, Kathy Knack, Court Cock, Sharon Kuhlman, Roger Litterer, Scott McMahon, Dolores Meeks, Barbara Michelson, Rick Miller, Mary Montgomery, Millie Moltoff, Carolyn Mumm.
Al Whitey Nauman, Stacy Nitcher, Melvin Bill Raub, Kenny Regan, Don Reiter, Bill Robert, Ladonna Rowell, John Shute, William Shute, Sid Sidler, Brittany Smith, Earl Smith, Edwin Smith, Gerald T. Smith, Garnetta Snyder, Rita Staebell, Ruth Strahl, Irma Thede, Kenneth Thede, Carrie Jo Tyler, Kirsten Wendell, Helen Wieben, Arlene Whitty, Richard Yates, Ricky Yates.
I'm beginning to think the storm that shook me wasn't the ending. That maybe saving she's hiding inside the breaking and the aching. I'm feeling the weight of love and the emptiness when you lose it. But I won't trade my life to feel safe, so I choose love. I choose love. This heart is still beating. Just got to breathe in, breathe out. My hope is still healing. Just got to breathe in, breathe out. I get restless, 'cause I can't pretend I've got answers for all of my questions. Grief is a friend and we talk in my head. Is this reckless or acceptance? Oh, oh, oh. This heart is still beating. Just got to breathe in, breathe out. My hope is Breathe in, breathe out.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming today. As you may have noticed, our Release and Remember event is today next door at the River Loop Amphitheater. This event is free and open to the public, and in a few hours, we'll be releasing 1,000 monarch butterflies in honor and remembrance of those we have loved and lost. This event is a beautiful reminder of how precious and beautiful life is, and gives us hope and inspiration that our loved ones are always near. Please feel free to join us for this beautiful and memorable event. If you do decide that you're going, you don't need to move your car again because you have a really good parking spot where you are. The easiest way to get there is through the back doors, which you can see we have a few exit signs. You can also go out to the front of the building and take a left, and there is a handicap accessible entrance out in the front, and we have people available to assist others with the walk up to the amphitheater. Again, I want to thank each of you for coming today, and I'd like to leave you with a poem called Instructions by Arnold Crompton. There is also a copy of this poem at your table for you to take with you. When I have moved beyond you in the adventure of life, gather in some pleasant place, and there remember me with spoken words, old and new. Let a tear fall if you will, but let a smile come quickly. For I have loved the laughter of life. Do not linger too long with your solemnities. Go eat, drink, and talk, and when you can, find a woodland trail, climb a high mountain, sleep beneath the stars, swim in a cold river, chew the thoughts of some book that challenges your soul. Use your hands some bright day to make a thing of beauty or to lift someone's heavy load. And though you mention not my name, though no thought of me crosses your mind, I shall be with you. For these have been the realities of me, of life to me. And when you face some crisis with anguish, when you walk alone with courage, when you choose the right path, when you give yourself in love, I shall be very close to you. I have followed the valleys and I have climbed the heights of life. Thank you everyone for coming today.